here.
Okay.
So Brian's like the last 15 minutes to talk about the Penguins, and with Matt can stay till 5, which is awesome. We really appreciate that.
Yeah.
We are live.
We are live, so anything we say now can and will be used against you. We're in the pre-show modes though, so.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Leaf Buzz here on July 20th.
No.
Hey, good news! I hit the Under Armour store just now and picked up a pair of Under Armour slacks.
Wow.
Okay.
Dress pants.
Thank you, Mr. Blackwell. Okay, let's move on to hockey.
Yeah.
I'm going to get them as a sponsor.
Okay.
Hold on 1 second. I'm just getting in the chat room here so I can get this working here.
Yeah, I'm going to get into the chat room too, especially this one guy who keeps pecking on me.
And you're there, Matt? You're good?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, great. Thank you.
This guy who seems to think that Cody Franzen would not be an improvement for the New York Islanders. Well, excuse me. You're going to be playing by 4 rookies on your team. Okay, whatever.
Freeze. I got 2 of me. 1 second. I got to stop that.
We're live.
Hold on.
We're live.
We are. Okay, there we go. I had 2 things running at the same time. Yeah, I had a delay of us running at the same time, which is always fantastic. Okay. All right, I want to do this so that you don't hear me. So, Matt, you might hear me typing, but ignore that. That's because you're kind of close to my keyboard.
Consider it ignored.
Thanks, I appreciate it. I will try to type quietly, but it shouldn't come up on the thing anywhere. Awesome, I got the David Booth picture up there. Somebody's watching out for us. All right. Sign in, come on, buddy. And it's. There we go.
Why does this guy keep saying, Josh, explain to Mike what a veteran mentor is? He's confused.
Because I told him that Cody Franzen, as a 26-year-old who's been on the league for 5 years, has more experience than half the kids who the Islanders are going to play on their blue line. But he doesn't seem to grasp that playing 5 years in the NHL would mean that he's a veteran and that he has experience. Excuse me.
Gotcha.
Okay. All right. Let's not be sarcastic. We have another Canadian. We have 2 Canadians. We have 2 Canadians on the air with us, which means sarcasm is not allowed today. Because Canadians are not.
You underestimate us. You underestimate us. We invented sarcasm. We're so good at it, you don't even know we're doing it.
Yeah, but the thing is, Matt, is that I'm from Buffalo, and that sort of trumps the Canadian sarcasm. I mean, I have the benefit of being close to Canada and having the Buffalo sarcasm, so it sort of trumps yours.
All right, you have a double dose of it.
There you go.
Oh boy! All right, we got a lot of people watching. People want to talk Edmonton. All right, let's get into it. All right, let me get my thing fixed up here. Sorry, Matt, you can't see things, so it's a little bit weird. We're doing things that you.
It's probably better that we do the normal opening and then you introduce Matt.
That's definitely what we're gonna do.
Okay.
Otherwise, everything would just.
Did you say?
Screwed up.
Did you say Metzer was coming on too?
Yeah, Brian Metzer. Yep.
Brian Metzer.
Towards the end, like we'll call him in half hour.
Okay.
Got it.
You've had Brian on your shows before, Josh. At XM.
And as Joe in the chat says, it is Tuesday, July 22nd.
Yes, thank you. No private messages. All right, that's one thing I want to tell you guys. We don't want you to private message us in the chat room because, frankly, we're not coordinated enough to take that like one extra thing of I don't know what you would call it, like multitasking, that we can't possibly do a show, look at the chat room, answer private messages, and also bake a pie, which I'm always doing during the show. So
it's actually locked up my chat a couple times, so
yeah.
There's a better chance that we're going to answer your questions if you just put it in the normal chat and not private message us.
Right, because we've heard some interesting and don't private message bizarre things to us, or else you'll just be banned. Because that's the way we roll around here. This is a podcast, damn it. It's not a website. You can say whatever you want. We can do whatever we want. We can ban you quickly as you can. We can say shinny. That's a way.
Puck and shinny.
Seriously. 3 people just private messaged me. I'm private messaging you. Guys, listen. Enough. Be nice, or else I'll turn this car around right now. All right.
Don't make
Here
me
we
come
go.
back there.
Yes, don't make me look back there and be, as my dad used to say. We'll drive 15 miles out of the way to see that biggest ball of yarn, but we're not staying at a Holiday Inn. All right, here we go.
Papa Rimmer will take out the wooden spoon. No, I'm just kidding.
I will ban you if you private message me.
The
one
Board
more
of
time.
Education.
All right, here we go. The day is the 22nd of July. Here we go. Miles. Fixing my hair, which is pretty
Give
much
it up.
a waste of time. All right. Yes, because I look like a bad character from Youngblood. Gotta get rid of the mullet. Here we go. Hey, Hockey World. It is Tuesday, July 22nd, and it's the year 2014.
I'm Michael Agello.
Me? Oh, I'm Josh Rimmer.
There's only two of us.
We had someone else on.
Yesterday is the first day we actually did the intro well. And this is like our 100th show.
So much for that.
So much for that streak. But we are so happy that you guys don't have to just listen to the three of us chat because you're kind of sick of that. So we brought on a real expert so we can actually have something to talk about today on a real team that's always interesting. And in my opinion, the number one writer for this team in the country, and I'm not just saying that because he writes for Hockey Buzz, I'm really not. But honestly, we are so happy to have Matt Henderson joining us today from Edmonton. Hey, Matt.
Hey, how are you guys doing?
We are good. We are good, and thank you so much. Yeah, this has been, another summer in Edmonton. What's it like? What? How are things going up there? What's the mood? Are people ready?
Well, the mood is always good in Edmonton in the summertime. It's nice outside. It's 30 degrees. Well, Celsius. It's not freezing outside. It's nice out. It's wonderful. And the team has lost 0 games. Dubnik has not let 1 goal in. High glove side. Everything is great right now in Edmonton. And it's always a season of hope. This time of year is great because we haven't had our souls crushed yet. So it's just really an uplifting time. And actually, and all joking aside, a lot of the changes that have been made have been really well received here in Edmonton by the fans. So we actually are, hoping for a much better fall this coming year.
No, it.
Hey.
Go ahead. Go, Josh.
All right. No, I was just going to say, Matt, Josh Rimmer here. Things must be good in Edmonton if you could give Nikitin $4.5 million.
It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money, but the reality is if you take a look at the Oilers' cap situation, they have their stars, for the most part, signed to long-term deals that are now going to look really good, like Taylor Hall at $6 million a year, Jordan Eberle, $6 million a year. I mean, in 2 or 3 years, those are going to be the bargain contracts in the NHL, just the way things are going now. I mean, you're going to look at what guys like Patrick Kane and Taves are making. It's all going to trickle down from there, and people are going to be making way too much money. Nikitin, they could afford to pay him $4.5 for 2 years because in 2 years, the Oilers are not going to be in trouble with the cap. They had the money to spend, and they desperately needed NHL talent. If you took a look at the Oilers' defense the last few years, it is truly abysmal. And quite honestly, the team with a lot of those players and pretending that they were NHL players. So they needed NHL players, and sadly, because it is Edmonton and they've been losing for a long time, and just the logistics of being in a nice city for 8 months of the worst parts of the year, you got to pay. So they get him for 4.5. It's way too much money. He doesn't really technically, if you want to think about it that way, deserve that money. But the Oilers can afford to do it. They're not a cap team. They had the money. They needed the body. So that's what happened.
Matt, let me ask. Not only Nikitin, and I think everybody thinks Nikitin is a decent defenseman, pretty solid in his own end, but it's the money that's been the problem with that signing. Not only Nikitin, but they add Mark Fane as a UFA from the Devils. They re-signed Jeff Petrie. They add former Leaf Keith Awley. I mean, they've gotten bigger. They've gotten a little more experience, but have they really improved on the blue line in your estimation?
Yes, without a doubt. The NHL, or the defense they have now, I would call it an NHL defense. Keith Hawley's going to be their seventh defenseman. He really shouldn't be any higher than that on anybody's depth chart right now. And the reality is that they actually have a player in Oscar Klefbom who is probably better than Keith Hawley right now, but they're going to keep him in the AHL because now they have the bodies to do that. So he's going to stay in the AHL, and on the first sign of injury, I imagine that he's probably going to end up leapfrogging Keith Hawley. The rest of them, Fane is a really interesting signing. The analytics community really, really loves Fane. He has great possession numbers. His Corsi rel, all of those things, they've been good for the last year. They've been good for the last several years. And he's used to facing, decent opposition every night. And that's just an upgrade from sort of maybes like Philip Larson, who is the definition of a tweener. He's way too good for the AHL, but he just doesn't have it for whatever reason in the NHL. Probably that reason being the fact that he's like 180 pounds and 6 feet tall, so he's just not big enough. And they went with a lot of maybes, a lot of question marks in the past. Guys like Anton Belov, who was the best player, or the best defenseman in the KHL last, now 2 seasons ago. But it was his first time playing in North America last year, and he did relatively well. But at the end of the day, it's his first experience in the NHL. So now they've gotten rid of a lot of those maybes. They're not dealing with question marks, and they're not dealing with people that are flawed for one reason or another. They're getting real NHL defensemen. So their top six, as far as defensemen go, they're real NHL defensemen with experience and promise, as opposed to depending on everything going right. That was the only way the Oilers were going to do well last year, is if everything went right on defense, and naturally, it didn't. So I think they've improved quite a bit.
And the one benefit to all these additions is they really don't have to rush Darnell Nurse. I mean, if he makes the team, based on his talent, which is plentiful. I mean, if he can make it, he can make it. But with these veterans that they've added, they don't need to rush him as a 19-year-old and force him into the NHL, which I think is a good thing.
Well, I think that's exactly what's happening, and that's exactly why they felt like they needed to pay Nikitin so that he would stay, and they would fill that spot with a real legitimate NHL defenseman. Because if you fill that spot with Philip Larson or Anton Belov, there's a very good chance that at the end of training camp, you're going to have Darnell Nurse standing there as clearly better or clearly the superior option. And they actually didn't want that. I mean, the Oilers have been guilty for so long of throwing in young players as fast as they possibly can. And it's clear that they wanted to build a defense that kept these guys down. Darnell Nurse, Oscar Klefbom, to lesser extent, Marty Gernad, and a few of their other prospects. They don't want them to make the NHL this year. They would love it if Darnell Nurse came to camp and beat out real NHL defensemen. But it's not their hope that he does that, sort of secretly. I mean, what they really want is for him to go back, play for Team Canada. I mean, he might get his 9 games, that the same kind of deal that Alex Pietrangelo got when he came to the NHL. Did 9 games over the span of like 25 actual club games, stayed up with the team quite a bit, practiced, but didn't get in much playing time, and then eventually went back, played for Team Canada, and dominated junior. So I think that might be the sort of the track that they're hoping Darnell Nurse can go on. So at the end of the day, that's what a lot of these decisions are there for, to keep those promising young players developing and not giving them too much too fast.
Well, I like some of the additions that Craig McTavish made. I think they paid a little too much for Benoit Pouliot, but he is a talented player, and he played well in the playoffs. Teddy Purcell acquired from Tampa in the Gagne deal. And I think their goaltending is solid with Fast and Scrivens as it's been in the last few years. But I actually think, Matt, the biggest and most important addition that was made in the offseason was bringing in Craig Ramsey as an assistant coach. He's going to provide a lot of, he's a great teacher. He's been a winner in most of the organizations he's gone to. What did you think of Ramsey as an addition to Dallas Eakin's staff?
Well, I personally, I agree with you. He may end up being the biggest off-season acquisition that the team ended up making. The Oilers have been known as sort of an old boys club. It's been a long-standing joke on blogs on the internet that it's sort of a once an Oiler, always an Oiler, and they mean it. And there is literally nothing that guys like Buckberger and Steve Smith could have done to get themselves fired. I mean, I imagine that Kelly Buckberger could have ran through the halls of Rexall naked, and he would have been completely untouched. And yet, clearly, there's a change that's going on, and they wanted to change the voice, change the culture, if you will, and no longer make it so that these guys have jobs for lives. And bringing in a real experienced coach as coached like Ramsey is going to do wonders for this team. They have a young coach already in Dallas Eakins. They needed somebody with more experience, somebody who wasn't trying to figure out what he's doing as he's going, right? So Ramsey's going to do that. Plus, he's been known to perform a little magic with some power plays as well. He has a history of running power plays and doing quite well with them. And the Oilers needed that. They have so many talented players. It was too many talented players to have the kind of power play that they did last year. It just wasn't good enough. And one of the things that Eakins did is he immediately turned over the defense and the power play to Craig Ramsey.
No, it's really true, and I think a lot of people seem to believe that that's going to be the key for him as a young coach to kind of give Ramsey a little bit more responsibility. And Ramsey's is basically a born and bred assistant. Like he's definitely not a head coach guy, but he's a great go-between. Between the head coaches. And now, when is the as we've seen, I mean, the pressure's on. Obviously, things have changed a little bit in terms of everything. But what would you say the realistic expectation of this team? Is it making the playoffs, or are we looking at a team that has to do more than make the playoffs at this point?
Well, I think Oilers and Oilers fans, I mean, they've had their hearts broken so many times, and at this point, you want to just say the playoffs in the West are insane.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's the thing.
it is extremely difficult to make the playoffs in the West. The teams out there are just so packed, and the Oilers have to leapfrog everybody else to get into a playoff spot. I mean, they are the bottom of the barrel. So probably a realistic goal for this team would be competing for the last playoff spot, and that means finishing no lower than 10th, and like a close 10 to number 8. That said, you can't waste all this talent forever. So they need to make the playoffs soon, and they have the talent. They've been drafting extremely high. They have players in Hall and Nugent-Hopkins who are young and good, but still have even another level that they can take their games to. So it's possible for them to make the playoffs. I just wouldn't call it a realistic expectation at this point, but definitely competing for that final playoff spot. If they're not playing, and this is sort of an Oiler inside joke as well, if they're not playing meaningful games in March, then they're in serious trouble. Now, the Oilers in the past haven't, like last year, for example, they stopped playing meaningful games in November. But, they need to do that. That's what they need to do. They need to sustain the ability or sustain a drive for the playoffs that's going to at least keep them close.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, it was interesting over the weekend. I don't know if you guys catch it all. The NHL was playing all the past Stanley Cup winning games from the past 30 years on each NHL network down here in the U.S. I don't know if they were doing that in Canada or not because I know they're different networks. But I watched the 4 Edmonton, clinching games, sort of back to back. They were on here and on the TV, and just realizing that it's been such a long time, obviously, for these. And I'm in a town that was 1975, so it's like 10 years further, but it's still, I get the sense of where you were when I think of myself 10 years ago. Of a team, we had a team that won a cup, and it's been so long. But the fan base there is still so incredibly passionate. I mean, the thing I'm always amazed about Edmonton with, and I think we've talked about this before, probably personally with you on the phone, is just that this team sort of feels very much like the Green Bay Packers of the NHL to me, where their fans, aren't owners of the team, but I think they kind of feel like they own the team.
No, it is truly part of the identity for Edmonton to have the Oilers. It's not just that there's a team and there are a few fans here.
Right.
It's just, for a lot of people, this team represents Edmonton. This team is doing more than just providing a little bit of entertainment on 82 nights a year, right? I mean, the Oilers group themselves, they've done a fantastic job of developing this sense of community, because there was a time when the team was doing terrible, in the early 90s, and nobody was showing up. And now the team is doing, worse than they were in the 90s. But the place is packed all the time. That's partially due to the fact that this is now part of our identity as a city, and as citizens of this city, that the Edmonton Oilers are one of us, and that we belong and they belong to us.
Yeah.
And part of that is also building the arena downtown and changing the face of the downtown of the city.
Yeah,
so,
right.
It's certainly, we have some very, very passionate fans here.
Have they become at all? And then actually, Josh has a question, and then I'll come back to me.
For sure.
Yeah, Matt, I just wanted to ask you, the Oilers now on their 5th head coach in 6 years. Is Dallas Eakins, you think, on the hot seat? Because being an outsider here in Toronto, and from people I've spoke with, he is. And they're expecting this team to finally do something this year and make the playoffs. Do you think Dallas is on the hot seat in Edmonton, and they might consider making yet another coaching change?
I don't think they will, unless he has an October similar to what he had last year.
Yeah.
If the team comes out and loses its first, 10 of 16 games, then I anticipate there'll be another change right away. If he doesn't, lose the plot right away, then I think he'll be fine. The team really shouldn't be. It really shouldn't be floundering the way that it's been constructed. They've really added a lot of NHL talent where there wasn't, where it was iffy before, and another year of maturation, changes in the coach or to his coaching staff. He now has a coaching staff that he wants. Dallas Eakins shouldn't be under the gun. He's also had lots of praise from Craig McTavish. Craig McTavish has very publicly stated that even at the end of the year, he said, more so now than even when I hired him, I believe that Dallas Eakins is the guy to coach this team. So he's had a lot of lip service from management. Not that means anything, but at the same time, I don't anticipate a change. I do think they realize that coaching change has been a serious problem. Like, take, for example, Sam Gagner. Sam Gagner has had a new coach in every single year that he's been a player in the NHL, except for one. Every other year, it's been a brand new coach.
That's a great point.
We have the center who everybody was complaining about not developing. Well, every year was year one for him. He had to learn someone else's system, be told that what he was learning before was garbage. He had to learn something new entirely. So every year was his first year in the NHL, and he did that like 7 times. So I think they recognized that having the voice change so often was a really bad thing for a lot of the people who were there previously.
Yeah, because since 2009, the Oilers only have 142 wins. Think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad.
It is, and yet, the fan base has not dwindled. The passion has not gone away, and that's what's kind of exciting about it. Now, goaltending. Yeah, you have a good little situation going on now. It seems like for the first time you may have some competition up there.
Yes, the competition they have should be good. I do think that they believe they have a potential number one in Ben Scrivens, but they clearly aren't satisfied. with just going on that, and so that they made sure that they had Victor Fast as well. I really liked Scrivens and Scrivens' game when he was here, or when he showed up, and from that point on in the season, it was clear that he was a step above what we had been getting previously, or 2 steps above what Dubnyk was doing last year. But they kept going. They wanted Fast, and they completely overhauled the goalies that they have in the minor leagues as well. So they went really hard on changing the people that were in and the personnel that the team had in all depth areas of the goaltending situation. So I really like it. I like what they've done. It's yet to be seen if Ben Scrivens can take the reins and be a true number one now that he's given that opportunity.
Yeah, that's what I want to see. I would like to see him do. I think he can be. I mean, he really feels like he can be.
I just wanted to say I made a mistake.
Incredibly intelligent.
Yeah, he's a really smart guy. Has embraced the area completely.
Oh, absolutely. Him and his wife, Jenny Scrivens, they're all over Twitter. They're all over social media. They are truly, taken to being members of this community. And if he can stop the puck, he's going to be a beloved character in this town for a long time.
Being on Twitter sometimes is not a good thing, Matt.
Not for Maple Leaf goalies, but Josh, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to make a correction. It's actually 132 wins since 2009, even worse than I thought.
Wow. Okay. Well, there you go.
132 wins.
It has been tricky. Wow. Okay. We're going to move on to other news. But Matt, thanks so much for joining us. You can hang on if you'd like. I'm going to be calling in Brian shortly as well. So, but let's talk. Thanks so much again, Matt. And I'm sorry I represented you on the podcast because I didn't want to just have them looking at us the whole time we were talking. So with at one point a map of Edmonton, and another point a moose. So that was, but it was a moose from Edmonton that I got off of Google. So, and I put your name on it. So I'm trying my best here. I need to
pull that off his Facebook page, right?
Well, I googled Matt Henderson from Edmonton. There's no pictures that come up of you. So I thought,
I've sort of done my best to keep my face off of the internet.
Yeah, that's smart. Believe me. I understand that very well. Yeah. So that's just having some fun because I wanted to pop up other things when I could. The Mike, and so I'm going to get Brian Metzer on the line too, and let's talk a little bit about the Leafs, who have gone once again to the great United States of America for scoring help, making it how many people now? We've got JVR, Kessel, and now Jake Gardner, and now the great David Booth.
Wow. Let's wait a second before we call him the great David Booth. If it's the David Booth prior to the concussion, then maybe this is I think this is a no-lose acquisition for the Leafs. According to Josh, the amount he's going to be paid is $1.1 million, which that's a pretty fair deal for a guy who has slipped in the last few years after the infamous Mike Richards hit that gave him a pretty serious concussion. He played well at times in Vancouver, but really didn't fulfill what they had hoped, which was to be a top 6 forward. I think this is the Mason Raymond of the 2014 season. I think that they brought him in, 1-year contract. They're going to probably play him in a skill role, probably on the second line with Joffrey Lupul and with Nazem Kadri. At least they'll try that. And if that works, then I think he could probably score 15 to 20 goals, and more than likely after the year probably go on to greener pastures. But I think it's a no-lose situation. And as I said to Josh before we started recording, started going live on the webcast, that more than likely this means the death knell of a guy like Colton Orr, who, even though he's got a year left in his contract making around $925,000, I think that he's probably going to end up playing in the AHL on the Toronto Marlies, because if you look at the 14 or 15 forwards the Leafs have right now, I don't see any room for Colton or even a Trevor Smith, who is the Marlies team captain. He signed a one-way deal, but he'll probably get sent down. Josh, what did you think of the signing of Booth? Is it a no lose?
Well, I mean, I used to be a big fan of David Booth, and I think I said this a couple days ago when we were talking about where is he going to sign. I think I worry about his health and how healthy he's going to be with the Toronto Maple Leafs. This is a guy that could not stay healthy. I think this is another. I think this is like a poor man's. I'd say David Bolin, because Booth won't play anywhere close to what David. I think how many games David Bolin. Well, no, David Bolin missed a lot of games last year. I think David Booth is going to miss a lot of games. In Toronto, this is a guy that can't stay healthy. I think I said a couple days ago that he reminds me like he'd be a part of the all glass team. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is a sign that I'm not impressed, and I'm not going to go on another rant here about the Maple Leafs, but I'm a Jackets fan for sure now.
I mean, I'm not saying that this is the end all or be all of free agent signings. If you're saying,
I mean, a good value. I mean, for 1.1 million, yeah.
Yeah, it's a depth move. It's purely a depth.
I think it's a miracle if he plays 60 games this year.
Yeah, but if he plays in a skill role and rather than if he plays on a third and fourth line, I think it's probably not a great deal because I don't think he has the type of game that really fits in the third and fourth line role. Although the way that everybody's talking right now, the Leafs' third and fourth line is going to get more ice time, and there is a emphasis on skill. I mean, they bring over Santorelli and they bring over Booth from Vancouver. Santorelli, I think, fits more in a bottom six situation. I think Booth projects more as a top six guy rather than putting David Clarkson on a scoring line. I think David Clarkson now moves down to a third line. I can see David Clarkson playing with Leo Komarov and that being, Komarov will get anybody's motor started the way he plays. So I'm going to be very interested to see how the lines get put together at training camp. Well, let me just touch on one more thing Leaf related before we get to Brian Metzer. The Leafs announced this morning the dismissal of longtime assistant GMs Dave Poulin and Claude Loisel. Both of them were hired by Brian Burke in 2009 and 2010, and they announced the hiring of Sue Greyhound's general manager, 28-year-old Kyle Dubas. He's been added to the staff as the assistant GM under Dave Nonis. Josh, this is clearly Brendan Shanahan putting his stamp on the Leafs organization. They cleaned out the coaching staff other than Randy Carlyle, brought in two new assistants, one of them being Steve Spott from the Marlies. Now they clean out the staff of the GM and bring in Kyle Dubas. What are your thoughts?
Well, two things, maybe even three. Number one, they got rid of those guys, I think, to clear their salary because they were making some good chunk of change the last couple of years when Brian Burke brought them on board. Number two, we heard Brendan. I'm breathing here because I'm trying not to go crazy. Brendan Shanahan, when he came on board, he said that they were going to make changes in the leadership. On ice, I don't really see it on ice. Off ice, of course. Yes, off ice they've made changes. They've obviously gotten rid of Poulin now and got rid of Loisel as well, and brought in Steve Spott. But I mean, come on, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not going to affect their play on the ice. Yeah. I'm still waiting for them to make that big trade because if they don't make that big trade, like I said, they're going to be losers again this year. They're not going to make the playoffs. Hopefully, maybe they have a shot at Connor McDavid, but I think they'll find a way to screw that up as well. I'm just not sold on what's happening here in Toronto. I'm sorry.
All right. Yeah, let's go to Brian because this is really depressing.
Thanks, Zach. Wait a second. If we're going to talk depressing, we got to talk the Pittsburgh Penguins, don't we?
Oh wait, shoot! I lost Brian. You guys can
Okay.
continue talking about this for a second. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay. Well, let me. Josh, you stole my my comment for or my my column for tomorrow because essentially my the title of my column tomorrow is going to be culture change catastrophe because there is no culture change. I mean, if you do not change the club, the constitution of the club on the ice, I don't care how many analytics gurus you bring in, how many modern approaches in for your coaching staff. I think it falls flat in its face. I mean, I think that this team has a definite problem with the leadership core, and they haven't addressed it. They have the same core. You still have Dion Phaneuf as your captain. You still have JVR and Kessel and Lupul, and
Yeah.
I don't see where it's different.
No, it's not. It's not doom and gloom in Toronto.
And I didn't even touch on the Dumbus, Dumbus, whatever his name is. Everyone refers to
a guy whose name can be
Yeah,
shortened.
let's not go down that.
Anyway,
I'm not gonna say
All
it.
right.
I'm not gonna say.
We have Brian
But-
Metzer on the line.
Okay.
I'm sorry. We'll go back to that. We got plenty of time. Brian, you there?
Yes, I'm here, guys. How are you?
Good.
Hey,
Can
Brian.
you guys hear Brian okay? Or should I turn him up, or what's going on?
Yeah, turn
How's
him
it
up a
sound?
little bit.
Okay.
I don't
All
think
right.
I've ever heard this voice before. It sounds sort of like a guy I do a podcast with every once in a while.
Yeah, this is the ghost of Hockey Buzz past. Come on now.
Yeah, I'm rattling some chains in the corridors here, guys. Right?
That's right. Yeah, no question. No, Brian Metzer, who Brian, you do a lot of jobs. How would you like to be described? What would you say is your main gig with the Penguins?
Yeah, I think it's probably the days of radio I do for the team. I do Monday through Friday a show called Penguins Live during the season from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and then I do Saturday mornings at 9 a.m. a program called Pens Week with Bob Grove, who folks may know. He does the pre- and post-game shows for the team and all of that stuff. Do some writing for the Beaver County Times, which is a newspaper here in the city, and do still some stuff with SiriusXM as needed, and other writing gigs here or there. I'm all over the place. So I sort of have well more on my plate than I can handle hockey-wise while still maintaining a full-time day job because we all know everything pays so well, right?
Yes, no, exactly. I'm using the picture of you and your sunglasses that I got off of Twitter as to identify. You okay with that? The picture where you're kind of leaning back, because this is the coolest I have ever seen you look.
I look like a rock star.
Yeah, you do. Absolutely. No,
So
it's
you go to
impressive.
enough concerts to constitute being a rock star, Mr. Metzer.
You look totally like a rock star, and you are a rock star. You are one of the best, Brian, and I will say that you absolutely. We miss you at Hockey Buzz, and no, I'm so glad you could join us on the HockeybuzzCast, and I know you've been doing podcasts with Mike and everything like that. So, but thank you very much for joining us.
No problem, Mac. It's great to be here with you. I've dealt with, I think, all three of you over multiple occasions over the years. I did talk quite a bit in the past with Josh and do the show with Mike you just mentioned, and always look back fondly on my time with the website. I do miss you guys, and I miss the community. It's really great what you've done over there, and it's a pleasure to be with you today. Thanks for asking me on.
Sure thing. No, thanks, man. Anytime. All right, so your team is a team that we discuss a lot for some reason. I mean, this has been a crazy-ass offseason. I mean, just let's start there. Obviously, there's no shortage of things we could talk about here. First of all, let's start here. You started the offseason, obviously, the disappointing loss in the playoffs to the Rangers after being up 3-1. And then we all kind of expected the Balsma shoe to drop, or, and then it wasn't the first shoe to drop. What are your thoughts on how this whole GM coach thing went down?
Well, I think when you look at it right now today, it doesn't look so bad. But at the time, as they were going through the process, the visual and the optics of this whole situation looked pretty poor, just based on the fact that everybody sort of anticipated, as you said, Dan Bylsma losing his job. I think there were some whispers of some groups of folks that thought Ray Shero could potentially be in jeopardy as well. But nobody, I think, envisioned Ray Shero losing his job with Dan Bylsma sort of hanging around. And the fact that they let him sort of twist in the wind for 3 weeks is a little bit odd. Not sure pinpoint why they did that just yet, because it still seemed like a foregone conclusion that Dan Bosma was going to be, hit the bricks as well. So they did want a complete culture change, a complete change in the locker room dynamic, a complete change in hockey ops and all of this, which I know you were probably raising an eyebrow when I say hockey ops, but they kept pretty much the whole hockey ops staff except for Ray Shero. And it maybe speaks to the fact that there was some differing philosophies there, because I know they think very highly of Jason Botterill. Jim Rutherford has come right in and given some new tasks to that group, brought in Carmanos, who's obviously done a nice job with getting them up to speed with some of the analytics, even though the Shero regime has used that in the past. But I think the biggest thing here, guys, is if they didn't have candidates sort of come out publicly in terms of the media scoops that were there, and then have those guys end up in other roles or end up as people who passed on the job, and this goes for the coach too, no one would probably be raising that many eyebrows. It's just the fact that something that was a pretty high profile and marquee job started to look like one that a lot of people were running the other way from, and that goes for GM candidates and coaching candidates as a number of names surfaced and then ended up elsewhere before they settled on Jim Rutherford and Mike Johnson. But right now, based on seeing how they've tackled everything from the day that both of those guys got their jobs and they've moved forward from that, I think they've done pretty well for themselves, all things considered.
Yeah, I would say they have too, and it's sort of almost like a shoestring catch, it felt like, from afar. Like it felt like, okay, like the coaching, a lot of people thought Barry Trotz would be a great fit, and then, okay, they're not going to get him because they were waiting. They still hadn't fired Bosma at the time I got hired in Washington. It's been. I mean, and then there's this feeling also that the GM is sort of like for lack of a better word, like a Sopranos-esque cleanup man. Coming in to fix the situation and be like the tough guy for 2 years. And what is this? What is he fixing in your mind? What is the situation that needs to be fixed?
Well, I think that Ray Shero, his philosophy was to really go heavy on defensemen. That was one thing that I know ownership really was a little bit down on, because every year you'd get to the draft. First of all, you will have used your first or second round pick, maybe even your third round pick, to try and reload and retool heading into the playoffs. So you weren't going to draft till the third or the fourth round, and then when you did so, you selected another defenseman. So they didn't have any marquee forward prospects in the organization. So that was the first thing that I know Jim Rutherford was tasked with doing, was sort of driving the ship in a direction where they were going to graft on some forward prospects, and they got themselves a pretty attractive one this year in the draft in the first round with Kasperi Kapanen falling to them. I don't think anybody anticipated maybe he hanging around as long as he did there at pick number 22. So that's another, hopefully, a steal of a Finnish player for them at 22. That's where they drafted Olli Mata as well, which is kind of neat to look back. And both guys were the 7th ranked on the scouts list too, which is kind of interesting. So 2 Finns, both 7th, selected at 22 by the Penguins. But those were the biggest things. And then the next was to just get them depth to the organization.
Right.
I think Ray Shero did a great job over the years of getting the high-level talent that the Penguins had to stay around for maybe less than market value and getting them locked up long-term. But in the process, you lost so many other players, the Matt Cooks of the world. You had to make a Jordan Staal trade because he wasn't happy with his role any longer. You lose a Tyler Kennedy. You lose all these players that made up your bottom 6, and I think a lot of folks forget that when they won the Cup in 2009, they had a third line, or a fourth line, actually, that featured guys like Miroslav Shatan, sometimes even Ruslan Fedotenko playing down there. And those are some high-level guys to be playing on your fourth line.
Right.
Penguins were using tweeners at best, if not AHL talent in that capacity this past season and even going back a couple of years. So in the injury bug, and they just weren't equipped to deal with that, especially whenever teams shut down Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin as well as they did. And still both, were productive, but not near to the level they needed to be to win games single-handedly. So when you mix all that together, people were disappointed with what they saw from the Shero regime. Also, I think there was a groundswell in the organization of folks that wanted him to move away from Dan Bylsma last year after the Boston Bruins loss, and he refused to do so. And I think that's what cost him his job ultimately, because had he made a coaching change then, I think they'd have been in a little bit better shape. He may have been able to buy himself another year or two and maybe righted the ship. But whenever you didn't take maybe ownership's guidance and make that coaching change that they wanted, I think that they just needed to go in a full-scale new direction, and that's what you're seeing now. And also, all the moves they made, they got very team-friendly deals with these one-year contracts. They got a couple of marquee guys in Christian Ehrhoff. Even Blake Como, I think, is a great energy guy for the third or fourth line. I think that's going to do well for them. A lot of people thought that it was a little odd for them to bring Steve Downey in based on his history, but his greatest successes in his career have come with Rick Tocchet, who I think with another high-profile guy that joined this regime and joined this organization. And you guys were there at the draft along with me. You sort of saw the Penguins draft table. It was a little comical. It looked like Rick Tocchet was the head of the organization.
Oh, I know.
And you just saw how he was at the end of the table. He looked like a mob boss, right?
Toc will take over like that, in a good way. I mean, he's that kind of guy. He's a very passionate guy for sure, and that brings you to a lot. It brings a lot of energy to the room and to the draft. Mike, go ahead.
And Tocchet got such a loving reception in Philadelphia from the fans there. Mets. The one concern looking at the Penguins roster, I mean, I see that they've tried to address the bottom six situation, getting a guy like Spalling in the deal for James Neal. But, really, if you look at it, I mean, Dupuis coming back from the serious injury. Hopefully he comes back at 100%. But, does the organization think that they have enough firepower after getting rid of Neal? Do they think they have the pieces there to, replace those goals that they lose with that trade?
Well, I think that a lot of folks are looking at this as a situation now where if Sidney Crosby and Kenny Malkin are, prohibitive picks as two of the best players on the planet and in the Penguins roster schematic, then they need to maybe carry a little heavier load. They don't need to be surrounded with smart talent. Some folks should look back too and realize that Kenny Malkin had a pretty high-profile season playing with Fedotenko and Max Talbot on his wings the year that they went on to win the Stanley Cup. They were his wingers through that run and got him a Conn Smythe Trophy as well. So I think when Gino doesn't have a marquee guy around him, he plays maybe a little bit more of a beast mode type of game. Takes over the offensive zone a little bit more, plays that role where he's circling and sort of galloping through the neutral zone, circling around the net, creating his own opportunities, creating shots for himself. And I think in recent years, he started to maybe defer to James Neal a little bit because he knew he had this sniping winger that would set up in the face-off dot. He could sort of slide a puck into an area and let James Neal snap off a rock and score a goal. Well, now, if he ends up playing with a Patrick Hornquist, who I think is a very underrated player, has never played with a center the caliber of Sidney or Gino, that's a guy that's going to go to the net. They're going to force both of those players to make offensive plays towards the cage, and then he's going to clean up the garbage. So I think it's definitely a step down. I don't want to tell you that they haven't lost something by losing James Neal. But a lot of those other intangibles that people whispered about with James Neal will be gone. A lot of the locker room stuff with him, a lot of the off-ice stuff with him will be gone. And I think that helps the team in a different way. You graft on some players like Hornquist. You'll have Pascal Dupuis back. Still have Chris Kunitz. There's people hoping that Bo Bennett can be healthy enough to produce this year. And even what we just saw from Kasperi Kapanen at the rookie camp this weekend, not saying he's a lock by any means to make this roster, but he's going to make them make some tough decisions based on his play there, and if he can bring that level to September, he's a guy that could compete for maybe some top six work early on. And I think that, yes, as I just said, it's a step back, but both of those guys are talented. We all know they each have Art Ross trophies and Hart trophies under it with less than marquee wingers. So I think that that's what's going to happen this year. The Penguins' top two best players are going to have to do that again. But the difference is, in years past when they were asked to be the Penguins' best and they weren't able to be for one reason or another, they'll have some depth around them that could maybe offset it if they are shut down.
Josh?
Yeah, hey, Mats, I wanted to ask you about Sidney Crosby, and I feel like I'm having deja vu here when we spoke a couple of years ago when there was talk that maybe, at least I was told, and I reported that Crosby wouldn't start the year on time, and I was told I was full of it. But anyway, Crosby didn't have wrist surgery.
You're full of it, Josh.
Thanks, Mats. Crosby elected not to have wrist surgery in the off season. Is this, do you think, going to be a problem that lingers this year? Because when I see this, I also think of last year what happened with Claude Giroux, and he hurt his wrist playing golf, had the surgery, and didn't come back until I think November, and he wasn't himself for about a month. But do you think this is something that can linger with Crosby, that maybe he's not going to play a full 82 this year?
Well, the sad thing is with Sidney Crosby, you can always bank on it being less than a full 82, I think, at this point in his career, and that's what stinks. Last year was his best chance at doing it, and he had to miss those couple of games late in the season, potentially with this injury that we're talking about. So I think that, I guess the silver lining here, Josh, is that if Sid does have to miss time with this injury, it will be at the beginning of the season and not at the end, so he will have time to come in and get himself integrated and back up to game speed. I know that his shot, and you guys watched him, I mean, his shot was definitely not Sid's shot during the playoffs, specifically the backhand. There was no mustard there. And the thing that actually stood out to me more than even the lack of velocity on his shooting was that he was struggling to take passes. And this is a guy that can stick handle in the phone booth and go through 3 and 4 defenders. And it looked like he had some trouble keeping a handle on the puck at times with this wrist. Now, I thought it was intriguing that because there's been a whole lot of these situations coming out of the Penguins this offseason where you hear a story today and it's different by tomorrow, and that's what this ended up being with this wrist. So we went from the end of the season with it not being a situation at all. Sid vehemently denied, and I know he's not an excuse maker, so he probably just hoped to keep the therapy under wraps that he was going through and have that be the be-all, end-all and get himself back to 100%. It didn't happen. Doctors were sort of considering that surgery that we were reported. I believe it was Dave Molinari of the Post-Gazette was the first to break that news. And then within a day, Jim Rutherford comes out and says, no, we sought a second opinion. Sid wanted to talk to this other doctor. Some of the folks they found a treatment that they feel is going to work. And Mike Johnson just addressed this again last Tuesday or Wednesday, I think, and said that he felt confident that the therapy that Sid's going through right now will be enough to get him back to 100%. And then, he was pressed on this issue and said, well, sure, you hoped, but the therapy didn't work once. Is it going to work now? And he says, well, you never want to say never. We could always still have to revisit the surgical option. Right now, they feel pretty confident that the injury was not severe enough, that it was going to be anything that was going to hold Sid out for an extended amount of time, and that this therapy would be able to get him back to where he needs to be to get his comfortable playing with it. The good news is, even if it is a surgical option, it's just an arthroscopic procedure, so it's not going to be super invasive or super long-term recovery time, and that would potentially keep him out, I guess, at the beginning of the season if he is diagnosed with having to have a surgery after all. But I still think it would be a short-term injury and hopefully something that he can sort of shake off quickly enough to get back and still be a big-time contributor to the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Very cool, Brian. One last question before we let you go, and thanks for taking so much time here. This is like my theory on your goalie. Okay, so I just wanted to bounce it off of you.
Why's it going to be my goalie?
I know. Why does it have to be your goalie? So here's the thing. This is I honestly don't blame Marc-Andre Fleury at all for what happened last year. I think that even the goal that the famous goal where he goes behind the net against Columbus and everything like that. If my defense was playing the way his defense was, I would have gone behind the net to try to get that puck too. So I honestly didn't blame him for any of that. And but my question is this: I mean, this is obviously his last year on this contract, and it make or break season, no question about it. So, can the Penguins win with him? And this is why I ask. I mean, and not that he's not a great goalie, but I get the sense from talking to people around the team and that that the team just cares a ton about Marc-Andre Fleury. The players in the locker room feel for this guy and really kind of ride his emotional waves to a degree because they're just they just care about the guy. It's that kind of a team. They're a close-knit team, and when he's struggling, it almost feels as if that hesitation that comes from that goes through the locker room and becomes an issue in every which way in the playoffs. And it doesn't happen in the regular season, but in the playoffs, the pressure, they know that Marc-Andre Fleury is under this pressure, and it just feels like it just permeates, and it almost, to me, is a distraction at this point, even if it's not his fault. Technically, it's a team often takes on the personality of its goalie. What are your thoughts on that concept?
I think that's a great point, Eck. I mean, Marc-Andre is a big piece of that team in terms of their personality. He was one of the first building blocks that this entire franchise in recent years has been built upon. Being you could look at he and Brooks Orpik actually as two of the first parts of the 2009 Stanley Cup championship. Right. And with Brooks having moved on, Mark is the last remaining piece of the rebuild, so to speak. Not counting a Sidney Crosby or an Evgeny Malkin. You know what I mean? Those guys that came
Yeah.
prior to that. So with Marc-Andre, I think that it's exactly right. They definitely support him. They feel for him. But I think that he did such great work last offseason after the debacle that was his playoff run that saw him lose his job to Tomas Vokoun and all of this sort of stuff that went down. And he worked with his sports psychologist, and he worked with new goaltending coach Mike Bales, who seemingly did great work with him. And some point that actually has to be made here as well is that no knock on Gilles Mirage, but Gilly had been away from the game for so long.
Yeah.
He played a different style than goaltenders today do. And Mike Bales wasn't all that far removed. I mean, he played in the KHL. He played in other European leagues. He played a little bit in the NHL, AHL, all this other stuff. So he knew sort of what the game was today and some of the things goaltenders were doing. And maybe that worked a little bit better for Mark. So he entered the season. He still had a pretty tremendous year for himself, one of the best of his career statistically, another big-time win season. And then, as you pointed out, I can't blame him in the playoffs one bit. He had the one brain cramp, and I think that really, I agree with you, the defense is probably a big reason why he came out to play that puck. But at the same time, that's been a bugaboo for him for years, where he just feels the need to come out of that net, and he thinks he's a better stick handler than he is, and he always wants, because he's the guy that wants to score a goal right now, too. That's one of his big-time goals in his career now, is he still wants to put one in the cage himself. He's come close a couple times and just had it just so off-kilter a little bit. So I don't know if he was thinking that in that situation or what, but the fact that he was able to shrug off not only that goal, but the bad one that Nick Foligno scored in overtime then to win that game.
Yeah.
And then come back and be pretty superb after that, I think it speaks to where his mind is now, and it speaks to the fact they still could potentially win with him. But I also want to point out that defense was a big problem. It got to be where it wasn't very mobile anymore.
Right.
Chris Letang wasn't Chris Letang coming back from the stroke. Brooks Orpik, there's a famous photo that was floating around online. You guys probably saw this. It's a goal that Columbus was about to score. I believe it was Boone Jenner sort of sitting on top of Marc-Andre Fleury. Brooks is down 2 feet in front of Boone Jenner trying to block a shot from the point. Jenner gets the puck and scores the goal because he's one-on-one.
Yeah.
I think if they play a little bit more if they pay attention to defense a little bit more in front of Marc-Andre Fleury and do sometimes what you saw the Rangers doing and the Kings doing, where they have a four-man unit around their goaltender at times and blocking guys out, not allowing that traffic to rattle his cage, I think he can still be a pretty impacted goaltender for them. And the good news is, if he isn't this year, not that you want to risk another blown playoff, but you can make a decision mid-season. It will be a little bit easier to move a guy on the last year of his deal or bring somebody in, and also speak to the fact that they have two goaltenders on one-year contract essentially right now. They just signed Greiss to the 1 year, $1 million, and they can go into free agency next year looking for somebody new, make a big-time trade, or decide that maybe Greiss is the future for them, at least bridge terms to get to maybe a Tristan Jarry, who we all know could have a high level of pedigree coming down the pipe within 2 or 3 years.
Right, for sure. Great stuff, Brian. Awesome stuff. Very, very cool. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. You can catch Brian in all the places spoken about before. We'll also throw his Twitter. I'm going to tweet out the podcast. So if you want to follow, where are you on Twitter, Brian?
It's at Brian_Metzer.
At Brian_Metzer. Yeah, be definitely the guy to watch.
And make sure you get a better scout of Pittsburgh's rookie talent than the guy you had last year, Brian.
Well, Mike Agello came back from London, Ontario, telling me how bad Ole Mata looked. He had no chance of making the team, and then he ends up being, number 5 in Calder voting.
Yeah, he was terrible. He was terrible. That's Mike.
Well, we won't beat you up for that.
Yeah, the talent evaluation, Mike. It's all right. You've been in Toronto too long. Talent evaluation is hard to understand.
Yeah, we don't recognize talent in Toronto.
Right. You don't see enough of it to understand it. So yeah.
Yeah, high-level prospect. It does not compute.
Right, unless they're an American high-level prospect. Yeah. Agreed. All right, Brian. Thanks, man. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Mets.
All right, take care, guys. Thanks for having me. It was great to catch up a little bit today. We'll do it again soon, I hope.
Anytime, man. Thank you so much. Take care. That's Brian Metzer from Pittsburgh. And Josh, you've been cheesing the chat room.
Oh, my God. It's like I have to go to the bathroom. Anyway.
Continue. We're going to do this, then we're going to get out of here. So what's up?
Okay, so here's the thing. I mean, there's been reports I'd say last week that the Florida Panthers might be relocating. Waiting to find out exactly what goes on with Sunrise and the building and everything. But it appears there's another team, and this team I thought we weren't going to hear about. this year about the possibility of moving. But then this comes. The deal last year that kept the Arizona Coyotes in Glendale could face a challenge after the city's mayor called for an investigation of a meeting last June between city council members and a team attorney. The meeting that took place several days before the council voted to approve a $225 million agreement with the NHL franchise could have violated the state's open meeting law because key information was disclosed regarding the city's negotiation plans. Now on Monday, Glendale Mayor Jerry Weirs asked the state attorney general to investigate the previously undisclosed meeting. Weirs voted against the deal in June 2013 to keep the Coyotes in Glendale. If an investigation is open and a violation of the state's open meeting law is found, the team's deal with the city could potentially be vetoed.
Good God, Josh. I'm sorry. I'm just preparing for crash landings here. Yeah. So this have we learned nothing about Arizona
I mean,
politics?
we thought it was done. We thought we were never going to hear about the Coyotes moving again.
It's Arizona. It's Phoenix, Arizona. Did we not learn anything? Does this mean, above all else, that we get to see another town meeting where Joe and Susie get to go up and talk about their love of hockey in the desert? I mean, come on.
Does this mean that we will hear the immortal name of Redfield T. Baum?
See,
I have his phone number. I can call and ask him.
These are my agenda glasses, I call them, okay? I'm going to put these on during the show, and I feel that there's another agenda at play. You always should see rumors through agenda-colored glasses. I feel as if this is a negotiating ploy only, and I'm not, convinced. I will say this: the NHL does not want the Coyotes to move for at least 5 years, and there's sort of an unwritten rule in the NHL right now that you have to be, if you're going to buy a new team or pick up a new team, or whatever, or you have to keep that team in that place for 7 years. After that, if things aren't working out so well, like in Tampa or Winnipeg or Phoenix, you can possibly move the team, but you have to at least be there for 7 years, Josh. I mean, and this is, oh man, what do you think?
And here's more actually. It's a quote from Weirs, the mayor of Glendale. I think it's a clear violation, Weirs told the Arizona Republic. That meeting is wrong on so many levels. It's like playing poker and showing your opponents all your cards.
Oh boy.
I've never heard of an open meeting thing before. This is just move the team out of Arizona already. I'm tired of hearing about it.
Oh, I know. I mean, Mike, what do you think?
A line from Godfather 3 sort of comes to mind. Once I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. I'm just really sick of this story, and if it's not one thing, it's another.
Time to move?
Yeah, well,
do you think it's time for them to move?
I think that the new ownership.
And I am
Jesus.
I'm very tired of this story.
Yeah, the new ownership group thought that they could make a go of it, and I would like to give that group a chance, but I know that over the last few years, the complications with Glendale itself has really wrecked a couple situations that look to solve the ownership. And at some point, if there's no civic backing, while everybody else puts on masks, if there's no civic backing in Glendale, at some point Gary Bettman's just got to cut bait and say, forget this. We gotta move this team out.
Sorry, that's all I have to say.
Okay,
Josh, that's a great mask, Josh. You always gotta be afraid of a person who has a Spider-Man mask so easily accessible. Yeah, jeez. All I can say. I mean, this is gonna be.
We can talk about this more tomorrow as it.
Let's talk about this tomorrow. Yeah, I want to thank Matt Harrison and Josh. You got something else?
I got one last thing I want to share with you guys.
Do I need a mask for this one?
No, but it's an interesting quote by Brendan Shanahan about what happened today with the Leafs. I believe we have people in our organization who have maybe been afraid of certain words and certain information.
Certain words. Certain words. You know what I'm afraid of? I'm afraid of the word moist. Moist is always not great. Just
I'm
that,
not touching that one. Literally.
No, but it's just a word. Moist. What does it mean? Moist it's just a hard word to say. Anyway, so they're afraid of certain words in certain situations. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, let's.
Yes, and the word is analytics. That's the word. That's the buzzword.
How about mediocrity? How about
We're going down the hockey nerd road in Toronto. That's because this team has been bad at analytics at Corsi and Fenwick over the last couple of years. That is the great thing that will solve everything. Is for this team, we'll talk about this more later.
Bring back the Kansas City.
Back to the Coyotes. Back to the Coyotes.
Yes.
Predictions. Where do they move? If they move.
Quebec.
No way do the Coyotes move to Canada. I'll throw that right out there right now. After everything that happened, there's no way they will move to Seattle if they move, but they will not be the team that moves to Canada.
Right.
Remember,
Mark them. Mark them.
No, Mark. Don't mark them down on this one.
Seattle,
Yeah.
Seattle or Portland. I agree because then they wouldn't have to move them out of conference.
Yeah, and remember this is the team of Make It 7 fame. They're not gonna move to Canada. So let's just leave it there. It was a great show. We want to thank Matt Henderson. We want to thank Brian Metzer, and thank, of course, all of you in the chat room who are really wonderful. Sorry I didn't take questions today, but I think we got to a lot, and we covered a lot in a little bit of time. We'll definitely take some more questions tomorrow, which is Wednesday. Oh, I got to spin the wheel. I'm going to spin the wheel to see who the teams are we will discuss tomorrow. Hold on. Feel free to talk amongst yourselves. Here you go.
I was just noting the shark in the filing cabinet there.
Oh, it's a dolphin. Yeah. I know. Well, this is the thing that I've told my family, that they can come down here and they can decorate. So once in a while, I get some weird, interesting things down here. So it's getting kind of crowded, though. All right, hold on. All right, here's my wheel. Oh, sorry.
Why do I see this thing spinning off into the distance and?
That's a mess here. All right, here we go. So yeah, this would be a dolphin, Mike.
Okay, thank you.
The fine line between a dolphin and a shark, but this is a dolphin.
I saw the fin. That's all I said. I'm Captain Quint. What can I say?
That's right. That's right. Okay, here we go. So, all right, trying to find this space in here to spin. All right, moving this out. All right, here we go. Ready? We're going to spin the wheel. Today's who we're going to talk about tomorrow. Dun, 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 dun. We already talked about them. Boston and Phoenix. We're going to talk about them on Friday. We're going to leave that for Friday because Ty Anderson's going to be here on Friday. Who are we going to talk about tomorrow? Tomorrow we'll talk about, we already talked about Toronto, Anaheim.
Just pick one.
We already talked about Philly and Dallas. Hold on one second. The Kings and the Panthers. We haven't talked about them, have we?
No.
Good. All right, maybe we'll try to get Matt Barry on tomorrow. So we'll do a rumor show on at some point, guys. Don't worry. But there's not a lot. We're rumors all the time around here. So. We're rumors all the time around here, and yeah, there aren't that many. There's nothing new on the Montreal rumors, and there's nothing new on any of the other. I've got nothing really, all that striking new right now. So tomorrow we'll talk about the Kings in Florida, and then on Friday we'll talk about Boston and Phoenix, or Seattle, whatever you want to call them, or as they're known now, Arizona. So we'll talk about them on Friday. So guys, remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. Have fun, take care, get outside. It's summer. It's beautiful out there. Talk to you soon.